Tony Blair, you've come here today to make an argument that there shouldn't be a general election. Some might think that an odd, even an uncomfortable look for a non-Conservative politician. Why don't you want an election?
If there's a deadlock in Parliament and Parliament can't reach an agreement and the Prime Minister feels his hands are tied and Parliament is insistent he cannot take Britain out of Europe with no deal, because that was never contemplated, and we decide that the right way is to go back to the people to break the deadlock, then you should go back on the specific question of Brexit, because it was decided originally as a self-standing question on its own, and it should be reconsidered on its own. So in principle, yes, of course, at a certain point there should be an election and decide what is the government. But if Brexit is the reason for deadlock in Parliament and you want to resolve that deadlock, then you should ask the people specifically on the issue of Brexit, not mix it up with the general election where all sorts of other questions come into the mix.
But you have yourself made arguments in previous general elections that issues are decided in elections, whether it's 97, 2001, some of the big questions that you settled. Isn't it a bit odd you were making an argument that Jeremy Corbyn himself was a factor?
So the question is Brexit an issue that really is on its own out there as a different type of issue that crosses normal party lines? And the answer to that is yes, it is. And we know that because it was originally decided in June 2016 by a referendum. Now, if in the end Parliament can't agree what form of Brexit and Parliament and government are in a situation of deadlock and you've got to break that deadlock, then you should go back by the same means that you originally took the Brexit decision. And the reason why I fear that the Conservatives may want to do a general election, not go back and ask people specifically on Brexit, is because they think they can mix the Brexit question up with Jeremy Corbyn's leadership and then hope to get support from people who may completely disagree with no deal Brexit, but say for whatever reason fear the Corbyn premiership more. That's the wrong way of doing it. If the issue is Brexit, decide it on its own.
Bluntly, who knows what's going to happen this week, but it looks quite likely you're not going to get your way and there will be an election and we might not get to a second referendum. In that election, would you vote for Labour and Jeremy Corbyn? Well,
it's going to be, difficult because of all the disagreements I've had with the Labour leadership. But on the other hand, I feel passionately about Brexit. So I think if it comes to an election, we're going to have to see, is there a way that you can construct a majority in the country against no deal? But all of that just underlines why an election is not the right way to do this.
But I'm not quite hearing a yes. Yes or no, are you going to vote Labour?
You're hearing a qualified yes, but the anxiety is obviously because there are things that I don't agree with in the rest of the programme of Labour. And that's precisely why you shouldn't force people to decide the Brexit question through the medium of a general election.
Forgive me, a qualified yes means that you might not vote Labour or you'll vote Labour with a heavy heart.
Well, a qualified yes means this, that I have big worries about the Labour Party programme. We have to see what the manifesto is, but my overriding desire will be to stop Brexit, or a no-deal Brexit, which I think would be very damaging for the country. But,
and a Labour vote would definitely be the way to do that.
Well, you can't say that, and that's why it's difficult to judge at this moment in time. I will do in an election whatever is best to stop a no-deal Brexit, but I think it's wrong. And I'm just an example of what will be facing millions of people if you have a general election. It's wrong to say to us that when the issue is Brexit, we're forcing you to make that choice in a general election where there are a host of other questions around security, the economy, state of the political parties that come into a general election. So that's why, I'm not giving a definitive answer at this stage to that question, but the very fact that I'm not shows you what the problem is. The problem is that in a general election, you'll be deciding Brexit, but you'll also be deciding a whole lot of issues that have nothing to do with Brexit.
To move on into the future, we're 1 year on from a no-deal Brexit. Can you sketch out what you think that looks like? Has Britain done a deal with the European Union eventually? Has there been a change of government? Is there an overthrow? Are we still in a stalemate? People don't articulate what that outcome could look like.
I think the problem with saying what no deal looks like is literally that no country, modern developed country, has ever done this before. I mean, no modern developed country has ever deliberalised its trade in this fashion, and no modern developed country has ever gone out of its preferential trading agreements overnight with no agreement in its place. So when people say to me, what's no deal like? I always say, I really don't know. I mean,
but if you can't articulate, how can you argue that it's a bad thing? Politicians need to do that, don't they, if they're on that side of the argument?
For sure, it's an enormous risk. Now, is it difficult, or is it damaging, or is it disastrous? That's less certain. Although I think most people who've looked at this in detail say it's towards the disastrous end of the spectrum. If it happens, we're going to have to find a way of trying to make it work. And, you know, I've always said to people, once Brexit's over, if we've done it, you know, we're going to have to try and find a way of bringing the country back together and making it work. But it's because, you know, those of us who studied this think it really is an unacceptable risk to take that we're taking the position we are. And I understand, look, everybody in the country is bored with Brexit. I'm bored with Brexit. Everybody is. But you can't, it's too big a decision to say, look, I'm bored, just do it. I mean, and that's where a lot of the public is, because the government's continually, both Theresa May actually, now Boris Johnson, continually saying, look, if any of these MPs would stop being obstructive, you get their deal. But they're not. They're actually looking at the detail, which is what they're supposed to do in a parliamentary democracy. And they're saying, whoa, this is a difficult, difficult thing to do. And we can't responsibly just decide to do it because it suits a particular faction in the Conservative Party.